Hello, this is War Weasel. Today, I wanted to talk about talk about my development process and how, hopefully, by doing things a little differently, I can do a little more than larger developers can. I like to call it closing the loop. First, what does that mean? Well, a development loop is a cycle. We start, we want to do something, and we have to try to do it. Then we have to test it once we build it and see if it worked. Pretty straightforward, but we have to do that over and over and over again to finally get to the point that where we want to be. So, how do we do that? Well, this is actually kind of an old concept. Going back to Lisp, we have the read eval print loop, the REPL. We've seen this in multiple places. We've seen this with JavaScript in your browser. We've seen this with the command line, even. You type something in, you get something back. That's not what you wanted. You try again, and you keep doing that. The Air Force has its own version, the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. I don't know much more about that, so I'm not going to go any further. But for programming, though, we have the code compile run test loop, in which I code something, I compile it, I run it, I see if it worked, and it almost always doesn't work perfectly. So I have to go back and code, then compile, then run, then test. And I think anyone who's done any code knows what this is like. So enough with that. I wanted to show how I'm using my development pipelines in order to create my own loops and hopefully keep my momentum and keep my project moving forward. So this is Character Creator. This is what I'm hoping to create my base characters with. This is the default character here, but I had to throw some clothes on her because she comes naked. Otherwise, I don't think YouTube will host it. I honestly don't know what they'll allow these days. So anyway, but I can make a lot of changes. I can look at her and say, okay, I want her hair to be darker. Where is her hair? I can jump down here, adjust the color, say, okay, I think I want it a lot darker. Let's make darker hair, higher contrast. That's, slightly different hue. Saturate that a bit, and we can come up with a much different look for her. There we go. If we wanted to take a look at her. So there we go. One of the nice things this does is that I can export this. Can export it for Unreal, and it does an instant level of detail for me. So if I wanted to do, let's say, 5 levels of detail, I can, and I can spit that out, and now I have my LODs all made for me. Not absolutely necessary, but perfect, very, very nice. Nice thing to have. If I jump back here, you know what, I'm just going to make a quick test here because I already exported it, because it takes about half an hour to export. Okay, and I'm going to import the character. Now this is with the Character Creator import plugin. The standard shader. I want to enable this. Let's do high quality. Why not? Skeleton mesh, import mesh. Yeah, let's do all this. Import it all. I honestly don't know how long this will take. exporting it takes quite a while. Oh, that wasn't bad at all. Here's my skeletal mesh. Let's bring it up. And doesn't look exactly right, but I can always adjust some of this to make the hair look a little bit less plastic. But still, very, very nice for a quick job. Now, if I want to check my LODs, I can jump down here. Let's take a look at LOD level 4. And blam! Everything looks a little bit more pointy now. If we take a look at the face, it's kind of horrific. But then we can jump back to LOD there. And not bad at all. Now, like I said, I would probably work on my own shaders. I would probably not make this a single. Right now, I think I have what, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm using a single material for everything, so that's part of it. Right. So I'm literally using a single material for everything. Can I isolate that? Yep. So it looks like everything, and that's why it looks so bad. But normally when I bring things in, it looks pretty good. More along the lines of this. So press to asset, so I can take a look at this. This is her with her regular textures brought in. As you can see, there are a lot more of those. But I wanted to show how we could create a character quickly with lots of LODs. Now the next part of my system, I'll go ahead and close this. No, I don't want to save. Is Marvelous Designer, which I use to create clothing. Here, let me, here. And then I'm going to reset. Why is it doing this? Reset 3D arrangement. Now, as you can see, I've brought in my mannequin that I use for most things. This is just the Unreal mannequin. But I've added in a couple of nice things. We have these arrangement points, and we have these bounding volumes. And what that does is it tells it how to wrap the clothing around it. I'm going to get rid of the bounding volumes. They're distracting, but you can still use this. So if I, let's say, choose. Now, right now, I have everything selected. No wonder. But if I select this, I can move it down here, and it will, wrap it around his arm down there instead. Or if I wanted to move it, grab that again, I can move it down here, put it around his legs. So that's nice. Otherwise, it is just a flat sheet, and it's kind of hard to position and get in the right places. Otherwise, this is a lot like creating real clothing. You create a pattern, you cut it out, and you sew it. You can use the sewing tool to sew various pieces together. You find a dark one that actually shows up. And you can even see them up over here as you select them. But anyway, let me put those back the way they were. We want to boom. And so now I can simulate. Boop. And everything should just go on the character. Yeah. I guess not today. It didn't like me today. Of course, it's going to screw up when I'm doing it live. You reset 3D arrangements. So what's the problem here? I have to show my... Right. Everything else looks good. Wonder what the problem was. Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's just... I obviously screwed something up. So open. I'll bring him back up. And when you do it correctly, it lays on him like this. And you can use your simulate and you can grab it, adjust things if you don't like where they go. So this is part of my system. So I can check it, see if I like it. I see something I don't like there, I can adjust it. Then after I'm done, I can export it to Blender. And here's that same shirt together. Now normally what I do in Blender is I use it to transfer the weights for weight painting. And I can use the mannequin again to transfer the weights. So the trick is you have to go to weight mode. Under weights, you have transfer weights. And you have to say, okay, vertex groups, create data, nearest vertex, object transform, only neighbor geometry, set these to something sensible for your ray distance and everything. You do it by name, all layers, and replace. And if you want to see what this looks like, we can go up to, let's see, the pelvis, spine, group, and I just created that. So let's see if I got rid of that, so those go away. I do create data, they suddenly appear again. So if I do that right, you can see where the weight painting, and you can adjust these if you want to do, you know, nearest face interpolated, I suppose. You could try these out, but I haven't had much luck with them. Yeah. So generally, I just use nearest vertex. Also, every time you do that, it changes. So you have to jump up. So let me try nearest face interpolated. Then you remember you have to jump up here back to pelvis. And I guess that looks all right. But from there, you can export this, and it has all of its weight paints on it. So you can hook it up to your character, which I can show over here. I can grab him. I have a copy of it. Add some clothing, Mr. Mannequin shirt, and game mode. And we can take a look, and there he is, wearing his shirt, all happy like. So, there. And it's sticking to him just like his skin. A couple of small issues, but I can fix that later on. Finally, I use Substance Painter to, you know, modify and make it look good. This is what I use to... Oh, come on. What did I do this time? There you go. What I do to make things look nice, I could put a nice, you know, fabric on there, if you just want to see the fabric. Almost everything in video games, since we're dealing with limited amount of pixels, I always kind of overdo it, so this has a really rough fabric, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see it. You know, if I wanted to, I could change this to, let's see, what do we have? Autumn leaf? Yeah, it's a leaf. Or, I don't know, branch? All right, now I have to delete that. Yeah, branch. Oh, come on, give me something good. Oh, here we go, copper. There. If you were making a statue, you'd have a bronze statue now, or a copper statue. And you can just modify that to your heart's content. Whatever you want to do to it. And you can play with it. You get it to work however you want. And then export that out. Let me get rid of that. Again, back to this, and it looks pretty good actually. You know, it's not bad. So jumping up here, you can even do stitching if you're good at it. The stitching will come from Marvelous Designer. This doesn't have it because I didn't want to deal with that level of detail, but you know, this looks pretty good. You know, if we go to the texture here, we can take a look at it. Here's shirt material, and here's what the textures look like. We can look at the textures here as well. Or if I just want the 2D. And this is how I drew on it. Drew directly on there so that it was a flat, so I could treat it like a flat surface. All the rest is just shading to make it look a little more realistic when there's really nothing else going on there. And by being able to go through these back and forth, hopefully I'll be able to create game worlds very quickly. The idea is not what can I create, but what do I need to create today. So if I wanted to, I could, what did I bring in? Yeah, if I wanted to bring in this character, I could. And you can really see the difference in the characters, but this one looks really good, this one doesn't. But from a background, that would look fine. So definitely worth making two sets sometimes. Finally, when it comes to code, which is what's taking most of my time, I have to jump. I found the best way to make sure my code, I can change my code. Let me jump in here, third person, is to make sure that it's modular. And to make them modular, adding interaction component or various components to my actors is what seems to work the best. They only need to have limited understanding of what the character is, and my character handles everything in between. So let's see, my event graph at my setup. It does a little bit of setup to make sure that my my animation events are connected to my interaction components. So when an interaction is done, it knows. But outside of that, the interaction component doesn't really care about who it's connected to, which is a really nice feature. So if I jump down here and take a look at the parent reference, I'm using an interface, which is this Warweasel player controller. Oh, sorry, Warweasel character interface. And from the... Stop it. Really? Okay. And that just isolates me. So right now I'm using a third-person character from the demo, from the template. And I just threw a bunch of stuff on it. And I can go here and look at the event graph for third-person character, my melee events, my interaction events, the setup, that sort of thing. So it's a very nice way to organize, and I'm still in the middle of getting everything back working, but this time all of my code will work with all of my characters, including my NPCs. Finally, I wanted to talk about the controller. I don't think people talk about the controller class enough. The controller, we have one. We have to have one on our character. What this does for me is it converts all of my controller input into events that my character class can then interpret through my character interface. So I have look right, look up, jump, move forward, move right, interact, and this abstracts all of the inputs so that I only have to have my inputs under my Warweasel controller. So I can just move this over to a new character whenever I need to. And also all of my combos, check for combos here because it's a buffered input buffer controller, which you can get free. So there's a lot of functionality before I even talk to the character, instead of having everything hard-coded. Most of the examples I've seen, they're hard-coded directly to a character. You have your inputs going directly to the character, and I don't think that's correct, because if, let's say you want to add another character, you have to copy all that, and there's no reason to copy it when you can just put it in a controller, which you have to have anyway. All right. Well, I think that's good. This is just a quick overview of all my systems and my software, showing what I'm doing, how I'm using them, and how I intend to use them to create quick worlds. Maybe in the future I'll have something a little bit more to show. Currently, again, this is my... there we go. There we go. Okay, this is a third-person character, straight out of the, there with my code on top of it. I have a few things to change, but there's not that much code, and you can turn it into this, which isn't working 100%, but still, it's there. So if I wanted to reset, and I have all of my interactions working, that kind of thing. Again, with fairly little code under here. My animation blueprint has gotten complicated because now I'm carrying weapons around. But outside of that, all this is just reusable functions that handle, melee. Goes into the melee, you'll see these are just events that go into pre-canned functions, most of which are coming from my components, my actor components. All right, and that's all I have for today. Thank you for listening.